On average, 4 people are killed on the UK roads every day. That costs the economy £2.3 million. Obviously, you've got call-outs of emergency services. You've also got loss to the local economy. It's just crazy. There's just so much to it.
Wow.
My name's George, and you might know me from the videos with the policeman Owen Messenger.
You have over 1 million TikTok followers and an overall 1.5 billion views across all your platforms.
Persistence, refuse to give up on something I loved.
The car community does have a tested relationship with the police.
I didn't want to be judged as someone that was working with the police for obvious reasons. I've had quite a few friends over the years die through either drink driving, drug driving, or unsafe, dangerous driving. It gets to the point where you're like, right, I'm done with this. Like you can only be sad so many times.
And when did you lose your license?
Firstly, great question.
George, thanks for joining me on Road to Success today. This has been a long time coming, and I'm really glad you're finally here in the van with me, having a discussion. Many people would have definitely seen you, if they're remotely interested in automotive, pop up on their phones, whether it be on TikTok or YouTube or any social media platform, talking about things all automotive and some things relating to the police as well. But we'll get to that. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the podcast episode, in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. And my name's George, and you might know me from the videos with the policeman Owen Messenger. And we make videos on road safety to try and make an otherwise boring topic more interesting so that young people actually listen.
And from this content, you've created one hell of a following. Reading off my little list here, you have over 1 million TikTok followers, 223,000 on Instagram, over 107,000 YouTube subscribers, 18.7 million likes on TikTok, 100 million plus views on YouTube, and an overall 1.5 billion plus views across all your platforms. This has enabled you to get yourself into an incredible car that is sat just behind us on the drive and open up different opportunities for your own life. What car have you just bought outside?
Okay, so can I just give some context to that? Now, I think a lot of people make assumptions in social media and question as to how something is financed. So I must premise in saying that it's a chunk from my previous car, which was my daily driver that was off the camera, a Jaguar XE 2018. That went down and the rest is on tick. It's on finance, and I don't want to act like YouTube has made that car possible. It's definitely made it easier, but it's definitely not made it possible. But outside, I have got my hands on a 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-1, which has been my dream car since I was a teenager.
And how does it feel when I talk about those numbers and talk about a dream car of yours that's actually outside the van? Do you feel a little bit overwhelmed by that and have to pinch yourself that you've come this far?
Good question. I think anyone on social media or in any form of business that does well, I think imposter syndrome catches on. And I never actually knew what that meant until someone mentioned it, and it really well explained the situation that I was going through. And that's feeling like I'm not worthy of being here. Firstly, I never expected to do well, because I think, you can relate. We all think, 1,000 subscribers would be nice. And then you get there and then it's like, 2,000 will be all right. And then it's 5 and 10 and so on. And it just snowballs. And I think I had worked so hard just to get 1,000. Like I remember taking pictures of 100 subs and then taking a picture at 500. I even made a video called 500 subs. And to be at a point now where it's growing like thousands every day is just crazy. But I know that we put the hard work in, but it still doesn't necessarily mean that I feel like we deserve them being here,
Which sets me up perfectly for the next question, which is there is thousands, if not tens of thousands, of automotive content creators, whether that's somebody that works a full-time job during the day and just loves going out and shooting cars at the weekend, all the way up to Shmee 150 doing amazing automotive content and videos, you smashing the shorts world, bringing in the police and law and finding a niche within the automotive. There's thousands of content creators, but only 1% or less of those creators have actually managed to make a sustainable living out of what they're doing in the automotive sector. Why do you think you're in that 1%?
I think we delved into a topic that no one had ever done. And I still stand by in saying that we are probably still one of maybe 3 or 4 that I might have seen a few around, especially since we've been doing it. One of a few that have gone in not only with the police, but gone in on not only the niche of road safety, but the niche of car modifications and the car community. It's a very underspoken about topic, and obviously it's a very risk averse topic. So having gone into it the way that we did, I feel that that became our niche, the car scene. My hashtag, for example, when I upload stuff on social media is hashtag car scene, hashtag UK car community. So that was very much the niche that we went into. Just never thought that it would take off, to the point now, if I don't put hashtag car scene, posts underperform. So it definitely is a niche that we didn't expect to work so well.
And I'd love to delve into all different sorts of elements of what's made that work to how it's got to. But firstly, for the audience to understand how you've got to that point that we're just
Mm.
discussing, I like to take it back and figure out what cooked you as a
Hmm.
child, what turned you into an automotive lover. What did life look like growing up? Were
Mm.
you a car guy? And if so, what age did that creep in
Mm.
and why?
Okay, so I will go back as far as I can, I suppose tie it into this story. Dad, forever, at least as far as I can remember, has always been into being a pilot. He's flown forever. He always took us out, but it was always very much microlights, small time aeroplanes. And then I remember him building a biplane, which is, a wing over the top of another wing. And again, it was always just my dad's quirky little talent that he did, but it was being around him and being around the spanners and the toolkits and watching him take engines apart and putting things back together that sort of normalized it for me, I suppose, if you like. And he always had like broken, old, beaten up Discoveries, old secondhand Land Rovers. I remember at one point he got the V8 XC90 in red, constantly complained about the fuel, but I just remember hearing it, not knowing what I was hearing, but something about it was cool. Never had flashy cars, never did the Ferraris, never did the supercars. We just didn't have the money. But I remember that he always had this quirky aeroplane. Most of the time, I was frankly worried that it would fall out the sky. I wouldn't have known any different. But I remember this one time at school, he flew over in what's called a Slepstev Storch. If you can find it, it's spelled Clepcev, Storch. And it was an old camera plane that was designed to hover above, I suppose, areas of interest so that they could take pictures. But it was so janky that he would have to displace fuel in the plane to allow me to get in it because I was so heavy. And again, I was getting bigger and bigger as I was going through my teenage years. That was sketchy. When you're told you can come with me, but because you're so heavy, we need to take out fuel. That was one thing. But then that progressed into him actually filming a build series of a P-51 Mustang, which is from the World War II. And to those of you that are watching, Tom Cruise has one. It was featured in Maverick Top Gun.
Okay.
Very, very cool plane.
That's
very
why I've
good.
heard of it.
Yeah, very, very cool plane featured in my Mustang Mach 1 reveal. And he was known as the Mustang Man. And that was cool, but very normalized to me. But I think that's what really got me into the love of engines because I remember he got a GT86.
Yep.
Again, not the craziest car, but still a hell of a driver's car, said by Jeremy Clarkson. And he took me around Castle Combe in that. And that was my first track day. And I remember racing against some guy with a Maserati and just thinking, this is so much fun. But I had a 1.4 Volkswagen Lupo that my granny had gifted down to me and my brother. And it all stemmed from there.
And that is obviously what started cooking this passion for cars. Do you
Mm.
remember though the first time that turned into you picking up a camera? And what was your first job with cars? Was it the automotive platform?
So the initial interest in cars was definitely through my dad having the GT86. I always think back, how did this happen? And I've sort of summed it up as being that. But in terms of cameras, my brother was reckless beyond belief. He would build skateboard ramps at school, bring them home, and then he would ride a mountain board down a hill. But he would always say, George, hold the camera, the camcorder. And that's what started me filming. But in terms of, I suppose, the YouTube thing, it was fixing cars and trying to save money because I couldn't afford to go to the main dealers.
And how long have you now been doing that?
YouTube since I think 13 years I've had an account.
Wow.
8 years I've been grafting to build a following. And maybe the last 3 years I've been working really hard for it, and two years full time. But yeah, it all started in Ford, selling cars at Ford. That
I think there's so many people out there that must fall off the rails so early in trying for 6 months or a year, and then it just gets a bit less, a bit less, a bit less, and suddenly they're going in the wrong direction. What made you just want to keep going and push on with it?
There's honestly so much to it. And sometimes even now I struggle to remember like what the pieces were that kind of like tied it all together. But just persistence, refused to give up on something I loved because I was forever losing jobs and being fired from jobs that I just didn't quite match what they wanted. I didn't listen, or I did something, but not quite the way that they wanted it. And I never understood why. And that will lead on to later on the podcast, I'm sure. But there was always something that made me feel not as good as the other people working. And I always got fired, always never made it past probation. And it just got to the point where I was fed up. So that became my side hustle, the thing that I did outside of work.
So did that make you want to just work for yourself, or were you still trying to find a place, trying to find where you wanted to be and not get fired?
I think so. It's almost fake it till you make it. And I think sometimes a lot of people will act like they're doing well, even if they're not. And I was always that guy. Oh, I've done this, or it's working really well. And I was always trying to convince my mum that this is the way it's going to be. YouTube videos are going to work, blah, 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 blah. I don't think they ever had any faith in it. And to be fair, I didn't either. But as I was a car salesman, I was able to have cars to film, and I was able to have cars to play with and learn and sort of build up my repertoire of car knowledge. And then, I suppose the stories all tie in later on when we met Owen.
So I can see it from there. Childhood, engines, GT86s, track days, jobs, ended up going to car sales. There's clearly a massive passion for automotive there. But automotive means so many different things to so many different people. And we're just about to get on to the fact that your amazing niche that you found, and sometimes you can't go out with a business plan for these things. You just fall into these things, is definitely the relationship with the police, and also bringing road safety across to millions of people and actually hoping to make a difference with that information. But that's not where your content started, right? Where did your content actually start?
Wow. So I was a personal trainer, but I was just very bad at business. So I was very passionate about it, always in the gym, always helping people, love speaking to people, but I was very bad at turning it into a profitable business. So that kind of ended up turning into making fitness videos online, and then wanting to go down the hashtag fitness influencer route. I remember going to Body Power in 2015, and that's, I'm pretty sure, quote me if I'm wrong, the same year Ben Francis released Gymshark. And I remember walking past him, fist pumping him, and just being like, respect, bro. Like, that was same year Christian Guzman was on stage, Nikki Blacketer, the Hodge twins, and various other people that you might remember from Gymshark. And I remember that being the year that I was filming YouTube videos, come with me to Body Power, blah, 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 blah. And I was very into street workout and calisthenics. Made a load of videos doing it, but they sucked. I've privated them all now, but they are so bad, it's embarrassing. You can tell that I'm looking at the monitor, not the lens. They're really badly edited. There's no storyline. There's no storytelling. It's awful, but so essential to get to where I am now, moving more into the cars and the automotive videos.
So most people would have seen where you are now. They'll see you with Owen.
Okay.
And Owen is the police officer that you create a lot of your content with.
Mm-hmm.
And is he a traffic force officer? Do you want to explain who Owen is and what Owen does?
Okay, so Owen is 20 years deep into being a road casualty reduction officer.
Okay.
So his job is to police the roads and reduce casualties, kind of goes in the title. Very, very passionate about what he does, extremely experienced. But as not only being an officer, but also a sergeant, he has spent many, many years, or I suppose his whole life, being a car enthusiast. He has had some cars that would make even me and you wince. From the Mark II RS, the Mark III RS, but he's had Cozzies as well. I don't want to name them all because I feel like I'll get them wrong, but he's had old Scoobies, various different things that to the old school car scene kids from the 80s and the 90s would just make them so jealous. And he's built this experience that's now doubled up with his experience as an officer in road safety. And now, for some reason, we've just created this thing that we do.
Where did you meet?
Okay. Yeah. Where did we meet? So he knocked on my door in lockdown. At that point, I was at 9,000 to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. I've been filming car meets, fitting stuff to my car, my Megane R26.
A police officer knocked on your door in lockdown?
Yes. Weird story, I know. So I had been making all these videos, but most of them at that time were all in car meets, filming burnouts, filming pops and bangs, the dangerous stuff, right? He knocks on my door, to my complete dismay, and comes in and says, look, I've seen your videos. I think you come across well on camera, and we would like to maybe offer you the opportunity to make some road safety content. Basically, he highlighted that there's a vulnerable road user group, the young drivers, and they're especially hard to get through to in the Southwest. How would you feel about making a video? And at that time, we had no idea what would happen next. And we just made one video. And I remember around Christmas, it just went, whoosh, just took off.
So did you just agree to do that? Or did you think about it for a while? Why did it matter to you that actually that's something that you would do?
Very good question. So initially it was oh God, the police have got a bit of a bad light in the car community. I didn't want to be judged as someone that was working with the police for obvious reasons. So I went through the family and kind of ran it past them. And then we kind of highlighted the past that, you've just asked about. So to the viewer watching, I've had quite a few friends over the years die through either drink driving, drug driving, or unsafe, dangerous driving. I've lost my license as well through speeding over the years. But having that happen so many times kind of just gets to the point where you're like, right, I'm done with this. Like you can only be sad so many times. And then when he mentioned it, it just felt like that bow was just pulled together. And I was like, right, this is my thing. Like, I need to do this. So it reduces it happening to someone else.
So how old are you now?
33.
Wow. I'm coming up with so many things I didn't know. And when did you lose your license?
I lost my life. Oh, I'm not going to be able to tell you accurately. It's going to be a guesstimate
Early
situation.
20s, late 20s?
Mid 20s, I think. I had a McGann R26, like a 225 cup, if anyone remembers the blue, 2-litre turbo. Had one of those, just the totting up procedure. I had just not paid attention to the speed limit more than once. And as a result, they were just like, whatever. The best bit is I went to court and I was going to fight the situation by saying, look, I'm a personal trainer. I need my car to get to see clients. And their argument, I'll never forget. They were like, George, you're a fit and healthy chap. You can walk to work. And then lost my license. Done. 6 months with no car. It wasn't super long, but it was enough to be like,
I don't want this to happen again.
I should have listened.
So, okay, I'm starting to understand. And you mentioned that you sadly lost some friends due to different reasons within automotive crashes. And I don't think there's anybody out there that is watching that if they're in a car community hasn't heard of that happening
we've all
someone.
Seen it happen.
I can't say that he was a friend because I didn't really know him, but a friend of my group lost his life a few years ago in a tragic way behind the wheel of a car. And I saw how that affected my friends that knew him and what's come with it. So it's clearly important to you why you're making this content. And luckily it's done very well. So yourself and Owen, how often and frequently do you go out and film and what sort of topics we cover? Because I also don't want to gloss over the fact that you meant the car community does have a tested relationship with the police.
Yeah.
I definitely see that in the Swindon car community.
Completely understand, and we'll go into that later.
That must have been a hell of a risk for your content creation and your platform to basically suddenly be putting yourself next to a high-vis officer.
Yeah. So where do I start? Of course, I had that worry straight away. It was on the phone to mum, my dad. They're both very different people. So they're going to be giving me advice in very different ways. And then I've got quite a few siblings as well. So I discussed it with all of them. And we came to the conclusion that provided you do it right, provided you stay within the guidelines, and provided you're honest to, at the time I didn't know Owen personally. So it was provided you're honest to a certain degree with the police, but also let them know that you've got your barriers and you're not prepared to talk about this, for example. I always said from the get-go, I am never going to throw anyone under the bus. For example, if I saw you do something bad on the road, that's never going to turn into content that I would make. Does that make sense? It was always going to be, someone might have fitted wheels incorrectly. Here's how you don't do that. Someone might have a sunstrip. Here's the rules you need to know about a sunstrip. So it kind of was very carefully planned, but getting to know Owen, I soon came to realize that he was never about throwing anyone under the bus. It was all about, look, I scrape people off the road. I have to go and knock on people's door to say their daughter or their dad's not coming home today. We need to make these videos so that it stops happening to people. And I look to interview people that have been part of some of these road casualties. And in the future, I'd like to make that more commonly spoken about. There are people's lives that are hugely affected by this, by just doing a burnout, by driving a bit too fast. And again, it'll never happen to me. So I'm definitely motivated to do it, very passionate about it. And I'm in no way ashamed of my relationship with Owen, despite the hate comments we get. But I must premise in saying, to summarize your question, it's only people that don't know me or people that don't know all of our content that pass that judgment. If anyone were to meet me and throw hate they can't meet, they probably don't know the good in what I'm doing. It's all just the copper relationship. It's never the rest of it. Does that make sense?
Oh, because I've seen that firsthand. Because I think the first video that I saw pop up, I was actually rather fittingly a front number plate video.
It's almost like you own a supercar then.
Yeah, the front number plate video of yourself. And I'm like, God, just hundreds of that. It's more interaction that baffles me, because
Mm.
interaction is the hardest thing to get now on content
Get people
creation.
talking is hard.
Everyone talks about
Yeah.
views, and even I list them off at the start of the episode. But getting people talking and creating a discussion is the hardest thing to do online. But you guys definitely seem to have done
Was it
very
the Ferrari
well.
video you saw? And he
Yeah.
was stood next to his cop car.
Yes. Was
the
it
Ferrari.
488?
Maybe. I'm not well versed on supercars, but I remember that video because we've shared it quite a few times over the years with different captions. But it was all about the manufacturer or the dealership should supply you with a plinth so that you can accurately put it on. But I also, as a car guy, understand if you've got a very nice car, you do not want to spoil it with a number plate. I get it entirely. And the argument would be if you can afford a Ferrari, you can afford the fine. And then you've got the people that will just have a number plate anyway. Some people put it in the windscreen, some people have none, don't care. So it was very much, we're not telling you what to do, but just so you know, in case you cared, here's a video that tells you what you should do. We don't in any way say you have to do this, because as much as that's Owen's job, it's not my job. My job is to educate. Owen's job is to, I suppose, preach and make sure that it actually happens. Police it, if you like.
And he's preaching because off camera earlier on, you started telling me some facts and figures from the knowledge that you've gained from doing
Mm.
this about road casualties in the UK. And I just had no idea. Like, do you want to read off the top of your head some of the things that you've learned from doing this?
Okay, so I'll give you a scenario because sometimes it's easier to explain a scenario and then as a result, some of the figures. Let's just say after lockdown, you hadn't driven your caravan in a long time. And let's say that caravan had a bubble in the tire that you hadn't noticed because maybe that's not your thing and you weren't observant enough to have paid attention. You take your family, you go off in your car that can tow the caravan, you go down the road and then your caravan tire pops, it jackknifes, and then it covers the entire road, causing traffic jams for miles. Per hour, that crash costs the economy £2.3 million. So, of course, everyone's immediate question is, how on earth does it cost that much money? So, obviously, you've got call outs of emergency services, whether that be the helicopters, whether that be the police, time and whatever. You've also got loss to the local economy. So, if that pub had a booking for a reservation or so-and-so, then he's lost his booking.
Now, Owen couldn't be here today, and I quite like my format that I do these podcasts in, with two of us sat opposite talking. However, he has kindly sent in a load of, I think you could say, questions and facts.
Yeah,
statistics for you to read out on the podcast today. So do you want to start by sharing some of those with us?
Okay, so firstly, Owen, thank you so much for this. I basically said to him, I'm going on this great podcast and I need some stuff to wow the audience because they might not know some of the stuff that Owen knows. So I've got a short breakdown here. On average, 4 people are killed on the UK roads every day. That's over 3 times those killed in violent crime or stabbings, yet it doesn't make the news and it is just accepted. 28,000 people are seriously injured per year. Why should this be the case? Virtually all of these deaths are due to someone doing something wrong. So somebody's fault, yet nobody leaves home thinking that they won't make it back. Unless I'd met Owen, I had no idea about any of these statistics. So the role that the police play in reducing these numbers or the impact that the road deaths had both to the people and families involved or financially to the economy. Closing the motorway, for example, costs the economy around 1 million per hour in lost output to business alone. A fatal costs 2.3 million. So I do apologize from earlier. So it's 2.3 million for a fatal. And there are 4 per day. So how much do the 28,000 serious injuries cost the NHS? How does that affect the NHS waiting times? So it's just crazy. There's just so much to it. Young drivers have a high perception of their own skill and a low perception of risk. That's just natural. So how do we address that with a generation that are often unwilling to engage or often told that they can and they can't do? So the car community have for years had a negative relationship with the police, which we all, we spoke about earlier. We all understand that. And the vast majority are good people who want to enjoy their cars with their friends and they have good intentions. Sadly, they are let down by some who don't want to follow the rules. And there are those who bow to peer pressure and to perform outside of their comfort zone and skill level. The police have had to get involved as they have to have an obligation to ensure the public safety. And we have all seen the videos of what goes wrong, often in #Mexico. But people think it only happens to others and, of course, never to them. So when it comes to mods, people are influenced these days by social media experts, the Facebook groups and so on, and people who think they know, but they don't. So the law is complex, so we do try and explain it in a simple format. And cars are dangerous, so there has to be rules. Sometimes you can't do what you want, and that's just the way it is. So that's what I had to say.
And you guys have been doing this content for a long time now. And again, thanks to Owen for sending those
Mm,
statistics in. I'm sure that's just less than 1% of statistics you could read out today.
absolutely.
And frightening, frightening fact. Do you have an example of content that you guys have created causing a positive impact out there, and then why that's important going forward and where you think you can go with this?
I think obviously it's worth premising that there is extremely negative videos that we've made regarding topics that people just don't like, and there's nothing we can do about that. But then there are also positive ones that we didn't assume would have such a nice reaction. For example, Owen made a video on 5 things you should do in the winter to make sure that your car's safe. And we'd have people write in, especially mothers, saying, "Thank you so much for that video because my son has finally listened. He has finally seen the importance of changing his tires. Now he's not spending money on his Xbox. Instead, he's investing money in good quality tires. Now my daughter has learned how to change her brake pads and she realizes that it's important to not have bare metal, but instead listen to my video about EBC pads, for example, and the different compounds. So now she's paying attention to that. There are people that are doing things safely off the back of our videos. And I'd like to assume that at some point, someone has thought of what we had said. And as a result, it stopped them dying on the road. So I know that our videos, like I said, can come across as negative, but sometimes there must be an opportunity for them to have been positive. Surely the amount of, as we mentioned, at 1.5 billion people, someone at the right time has thought twice. And I'd like to think that that's made a difference overall.
And when you look down the content that you guys create, I'd say that it is making a difference because there is way more positive feedback on certainly the recent videos that I checked out before the podcast
Mm,
than there is negative. However, there is the negative in there. And one comment that I picked out from a Instagram post before coming on here was a comment about why Owen was spending so much time stood making videos and less time actually out
mm.
on the road policing. What would you have to say to something like that?
Firstly, great question, because there's only so many times I can actually respond to that on social media. So it's got to the point now where I just have to ignore it because we've made videos on this. Owen is a full-time policeman. He's a full-time professional, does what he does. And when he works with me, those are his days off that he has come in and he has made his own time unpaid to work with me. So his passion has resulted in him spending less time with his family, less time with his friends, less time fishing, less time doing whatever, and is now hanging around with me, just an idiot with a camera, right? So
I
I
don't
get
know how
it.
he does that.
I don't know how he does that. I completely understand where people are coming from, but what people need to realize is that we will bulk film, say, for example, 40 TikToks that happen to turn into 40 Instagram reels. And then I will publish those in such a way that it looks like we have been filming together every single day. And you know as well as I do that consistency is key on social media. So you need content every day. So I've got to the point now where I save them all as drafts. I do all the captions, I do everything. So I could be on holiday, enjoying a cocktail and just press post. So it's simple for me now because I spent years carving that skill, but it does ultimately, I suppose, stem arguments because it makes people look or people think, so to speak, that me and Owen are doing it all the time. No, he's full-time policeman and spends some time making videos with me.
But you are doing this a lot of the time, in
Mm,
respect to you, and you've managed to monetize that. You
mm,
said before, for years, you were a personal trainer. This was something that was on
mm,
the side. But finally, in the last 2 years, when you have gone all balls in
mm.
with doing your content, you've turned this into a full-time career. How does that work for you?
Well, firstly, there's so many avenues, as you know, with social media, and it's not all, say, for example, YouTube. It's not all sponsors. It's not all retainers. It's not all this. I have tried my best, and I'm still working on this, still trying to fine tune this to make sure that everything that I do, whether it's put up against the business or whether it's funded by a brand or whether it's funded by a company, is going to in some way make sure that it's not damaging to my pocket. I am not like other YouTubers. I don't have money for multiple Lambos. I don't have the money to be in first class. I still have to live the humble life. And I know that's ironic hearing about the Mustang, but when you see what content we've got coming, that car is very much a prop for a series that we needed a high performance rear wheel drive car for. So again, I can put that against the business. I do not make loads and loads of money, and I am more than happy to admit that. Maybe that will change in the future. Who knows? And again, I'll be just as honest, but I make it fit just enough that it pays for my lifestyle. So, for example, if we do a road trip, then that might be funded by, for example, a company that's maybe sponsored the video. If maybe we've done a video on a particular product, some company might have been kind enough to provide it. So I do make it work, but you also have to be fairly smart with social media. I think you can do it wrong, and I think you can do it right. And you've learned this through having good people in your friendship group that have helped you. And I think that it's definitely a skill that takes some fine tuning. You can't just become a YouTuber and suddenly make it. Yeah, it's all
So,
about connections.
so do you think that behind camera, in terms of turning it into a career, selling to a brand, getting a brand on board, getting a sponsorship deal,
Mm.
getting retainer, whatever it is, do you think that you learned had to learn those skills to be a good salesman to get that over the line to actually make this all work? Do you think the behind camera work is as important as the content that you're putting out?
Behind camera work is extremely important. There's a lot of stuff that I do. And funny enough, I'll give credit to my housemate here because he quite often comments, even though it's just humor, that, spend a lot of time in your room. Of course, I'll have Netflix on in the background or whatever, but I'll be sitting in my bed on my laptop, editing away, making shorts, making this, making that. And then I'll be turning that into something else and doing this and emailing a brand and doing whatever. That's the hardest bit, ironically, causes me the most stress because it's so repetitive and it's hard to be creative sometimes around certain styles of content. But I do think it's a skill. And I mean, again, anyone that does social media will know it's hard to sell yourself. It really is. But my biggest tip is definitely make sure that your content is brand savvy. You've got to think down the line, are people likely to want to work with me? And you've got a fantastic business model. What you do in speaking to people about the rise of their careers and so on is fantastic. But if your content was negative and it was derogatory of people, you can understand 5 years from now, companies might be like, I'm sorry, we just can't work together. There's lots of people that do both. But I think I've honed it down now to understand that you either educate or you entertain. Anywhere in the middle, you're going to struggle. But if you are either an educator or you're an entertainer, I think you'll be okay. So in terms of social media, I'd say that definitely helps.
In your life, you've had some massive challenges, and I couldn't believe it when you told me a story that just makes any human being take their life for granted way more. I've had obviously things happen in my life. I lost my dad,
Mm,
things like that. However, something that you told me about your brother just puts into perspective how valuable and
mm,
freedom is of being able to go out and do what you do
absolutely.
today. So, do you want to share a little bit about what actually goes on behind the scenes in your life?
For sure. So firstly, big ups to Edward. Story for you guys. My little brother, on my mother's and stepdad's side, um, went on a school trip to France, just as you do, got bitten by a tick and contacted Lyme disease. So not many people know a lot about Lyme disease, and it's pretty much not believed in by the NHS. And they make it very, very difficult if you have Lyme disease to actually help you, to the point that I was very lucky that my mum was able to take my brother abroad and, go see specialists. But in short, if you have Lyme disease in the UK, you are going to find it very hard to get not only looked after, but to find any treatment. And it's, to my knowledge, incurable, as far as I'm aware. People have their symptoms reduced, but to give you guys a little bit of an understanding, when it comes to Lyme disease, my brother has been near enough bedbound ever since, has lost ridiculous amounts of weight, and his entire teenage life has been in bed. He comes to the kitchen, for example, to get a drink, and that alone will knacker him out. So he's got to go back to bed. He's on crutches all the time. Occasionally he's off crutches. He has good days. But for example, the other night we went to Gertwings and I asked if I could bring him along. And he just said, look, man, I just can't come. I'm just so tired. He couldn't even get to the car. He was worried about queuing for chicken. Like, he can't stand for that long. And he's the most intelligent, most lovely, humble bloke. And now he's almost 17. He's about to learn to drive. And I would love to use what I've built to try and help him learn to drive and also give him some opportunities, little things like, sitting in the Ferrari or whatever it might be. But I would love to go through the driving process with him, as now I'm in road safety. But he just struggles, like, because he's not visually disabled and he looks so healthy. If you took his crutches away and he just stood there, he looks great. But he's just in pain all the time.
There's nothing out there
It's
that's
so weird.
helping.
I'm not well versed on it, and I don't know everything about Lyme disease, but my mum is going through it so bad because of not only being his full-time carer, her husband has been diagnosed with stage 4 terminal cancer, which is horrific. A year down the line of him going through chemo and everything, and that causing immense upset with his kids and, of course, our family. Now my mum's been diagnosed with breast cancer. So again, it's just, when do you get a break? So it's, I live very far away from them. So I try my best to be emotionally disconnected. And I think that's the way I am anyway. But again, it's just sometimes you wish they'd have a break. But, regarding the Lyme disease, it's tough, man. Like, I keep telling her to make TikTok so that she can build a community around it so that other people can help her, but it's easier said than done.
I would say your on-screen persona, definitely because of what the content is that you're producing, is very straight, is very crisp, almost sometimes a little bit emotionless because you have to be
Mm,
um, to kind of be a neutral. With all that going on behind the scenes and being in front of the camera all day long,
mm.
having a persona, where do you let it out?
Me and my friends have some very weird hobbies. Not super weird because I can already hear your producer laughing in the background. We like to jump
Producer.
editor, whatever you want to call her. She's a legend anyway. We jump in cold rivers. We do a lot of sea swimming. I work out a lot. I go to the gym, always have done. But I've had a past with drugs that I've got over now. I spent a lot of time, not that this is a way that you get over things, but I spent a lot of years vaping, a lot of years smoking, just not looking after myself. And it's through meeting the right people and changing my social environment and meeting some really good friends that I've got. For example, my housemate's one of them. He is very switched on, very well read. And with the career that he's got, he's UK karate champ. Again, trains twice a day, 6 days a week. He's never stops. It's good to have someone like him that will call you out and be like, no, you can do this. You've got this. But at the same time, I've got the right people that are emotional too. So if you do need their side, their input, then they're there too. So I found that with my family as well. His dad was very alpha male, very manly, very, very clever, very switched on again, building the airplanes. And then my mum was the emotional one. So it's nice to have that, separation. But cold swimming is definitely it. I'm obsessed. I want to go swim in your pond as well.
Do you feel a huge sense of pressure in a way? Because once people contract, whether it be a disease or the dreaded C word, cancer, is prevalent across the UK. And if we started reading out statistics on that,
Yeah.
then it would just be so.
I've got some for you
is
if
it
you
one
want.
yeah, go on.
Cancer will kill 1 in 2 people, right? So as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, smoking will kill 1 in 2 people as well. So I think I might have premised that in saying incorrectly, is that cancer will affect 1 in 2 people.
Okay.
Smoking will kill 1 in 2 people. So that's crazy on it in its own, right? But just the amount of times it's happened to us now, it's kind of like, can we have a break, please? Like, this is a bit much. Yeah, I've dealt with mental health. They're dealing with actual physical ailments, which is quite saddening, to be fair.
When you're dealing with so many statistics, whether it be on your family side from disease, the dreaded C word, or automotive from collisions, it's all quite negative stuff,
Intense,
really.
yeah.
And it is intense. What effect has that had on your mental health?
I mean, we've all got our own coping mechanisms, right? Whether you smoke, whether you drink, whether you party, whether you like to, talk to the opposite sex or whatever it might be. I've had my ways of dealing with it. However, I've had my own unique storyline, so to speak, with, I don't know if you can call it mental health, but at the same time, I was falsely diagnosed with autism growing up. I was the awkward kid. I lied all the time. This is when I was very young. Found it very difficult to fit in. I was always the guy with one friend. Everyone else was amongst everyone else, and I was the guy with the token friend. Like, I liked him. I thought he was cool, but it was always me and one person. Usually because it was someone else that was unpopular, right? So I struggled so much at school. Saw loads of specialists. I was always labeled, George has got autism, this is why. And I felt that I used that label as an excuse. However, to my advantage on my dad's side was, don't let the label embody you, be your own person at the same time. I'm here to support you, but, be responsible for ultimately the way you are. You are responsible for your actions. And I think as I got older, I started to question, is this label me or am I just me? Does that make any sense? You don't want to be the autistic kid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I kind of embodied that so much that when it got into my late 20s, I started to really notice my concentration was hugely affected. I was editing for so many hours. I'd get so easily distracted. And that's when I then sought help myself. And they were like, you don't have autism. So again, that was a massive weight off my shoulders because I'm like, turns out I'm normal. Not that being autistic isn't, but at the same time, they were like, you've got ADHD. You have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I was like, oh my God, that explains everything. I was always super hyper, never shut up. My brain will notice the pigeon in the background while you're trying to have a conversation with me.
And I'll just interject here. The first time I ever met George, he filled my pocket with pepper and put an asparagus in my pint.
Yeah, see, okay, I can't act like that didn't happen. It did happen. And I thought, who's this loud guy? He's successful, blah, 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 blah. He must be arrogant. And again, I falsely made an assumption about you. ADHD explained everything. Admittedly, it's been unmedicated for a long time. But my attention span was always the prevalent factor. It was always me being irritable in class because I just couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate. Always me in the middle of the night, just suddenly started speaking to someone when they're trying to go to sleep. It's just like, shut up. But now I've just got older and I've started to embody my unique quirks. It's made me, and I'm proud of my quirks, but I feel that it's perfectly suited to making videos. You've got to be a certain amount of weird to pick up your camera and
In
start
front of people
talking
as
to it
well.
in front of people. I've got no problem in a crowd of people talking to my camera. Everyone
Or
thinks you're
asking
weird,
anybody anything.
but it works. And especially in this modern world, it's all about social media now. And I feel like it's taken so many years and so many sacked careers or failed jobs to get to the point that this one works for me. And I'm proud of that. So, you've got ADHD too, haven't you?
I definitely think so. And it's
Okay.
something that I've come to understand. I've not been diagnosed, but I think it's something that I've come to understand is part of me over the last couple of
Mm,
years. And I've always suffered with starting something and immediately starting something else, which is why I actually think that I found the role of maybe being an investor because I could do multiple stuff and having small chunks of lots of
mm,
pies rather than one big pie. I think I found that thing that really works me well because my brain can do a little bit of that and then suddenly be on that and be on that. And I've actually made it work where I started to worry when I
mm,
first started to realize that I had those tendencies that would negatively impact my career in business because I would
mm,
never be able to focus on just one
for
thing.
sure.
Where I actually think now that that's had a hugely positive effect because I've actually found the thing that I was meant to do.
I think mistakes are so valuable. And I think a lot of people, when they're younger, get so strung out on, oh my God, I failed, or this hasn't gone so well. But it really is, you are quite literally a product of those mistakes. Those mistakes build you, and you have to make, ultimately, relate this to social media, you've got to make a bad video to make the second one slightly less bad. You've got to have a bad relationship to make the next one better. You've got to learn from your mistakes. And I think it's so valuable, and so many people want to be professional straight away. But my favorite quote is, often a professional has failed more times than the beginner has tried. And I think that works so well with you, is that you quite literally are going to fail. And as long as you know that, and you know that that's going to make you better, then you're all good.
Oh, loads of times. I've tried loads of things, but occasionally you get those things that stick. And in the last 2 years, as we've discussed, we've gone up the highs, the lows, the effect that that's had, and all sorts of parts of what makes up your whole life and career.
Mm.
But where is George's Car Media going? Because you're clearly driven. In the last 2 years, you've put a lot of time and effort above everything before
Mm.
you said into doing what you do. So, what do you work towards? Why are you doing this as well?
Very good question. So, first and foremost, promoting race the track, not the road. I.e., if you want to drive fast, do that in a track environment. Do not do that on a normal road. All right. So, road safety is going to be in my interest, full stop. However, on paper, it's not an interesting topic. So, I would like to, obviously, we're going to be doing merch, and we're going to be actually setting up a charity. So, I would like to set up a charity that people online, I'd like to say probably the first of its kind, where people can donate to the GCM charity, and then that charity fund can go towards producing content to cover topics that I otherwise wouldn't be able to finance myself. So one thing I'd really like to do is go to the crash facility in Sweden. I'd love to go and prove the difference between a 10, 20, 30, 40 mile an hour crash and actually physically document that. And again, it might seem small because, you could probably buy a plane ticket there tomorrow, but funding that is hard. And then a videographer, and then making it happen and producing it. So we would like to raise money to make more of what we do, but on a much bigger budget, much higher quality. Top Gear's been axed, Top Gear's off. So we would like to make stuff that's relatable, quirky, but also makes road safety cool. And if we can, turn what's going on in the car community at the moment on its head, which is, you're cool if you do the bad boy stuff. You're cool if you do the burnouts. You get attention if you do the sends. You go to Mexico and you do this. We want to switch it on its head and make it cool to be safe, but to have all of that skill and all of that potential and that driving talent, if you like, but prove it in a safe environment. Similar to a swimming badge. I can swim 10 meters. We want it to be like, I can drift, but you've had an official certification from someone that knows what they're doing, rather than, oh, I did it around a roundabout. And then I inspired 10 other people to do it. And look, that person crashed into a family. Like, that's what we're trying to avoid. And it's the Mexico stuff that I think is the demise of the car scene. As exciting as it is, I'm not going to pretend like it's not fun to watch. It is ruining the car community. So I think if we can move towards finding places where we can drive, finding places where we can learn to drift, finding track tutorials and so on and so forth, I'd like to be the one that makes that happen. The voice, if you like, using my following to the car community's advantage.
You mentioned that Owen does what he does with you in his spare time. The police as a whole, do you think they deal with the car community in the correct way?
I'm going to say no. I'm not going to act like none of them. I mean, all of them are a no, for example, because there are a lot of fantastic police officers. But I think that overall it's dealt with in the wrong way. It's shut it down and then it will stop. I don't think that works. And I think what Owen's proved is that if you speak to someone like a human being and you sit them down and explain where they've gone wrong, they're more likely to respect you and as a result learn from it. The way that I always think is it's all good being stopped by a policeman because even the worst person will be polite to a copper. But then when they leave, they're like, they say all this stuff, right? So I guess it's leaving that good impression. And so many people have messaged me to say, I got stopped by Owen. He actually was all right, you know, I respect him. And it's so nice to think that, especially when people comment, although this might not be true because there's loads of people that don't get the attention on social media, there's so many people that comment, he's the only cop I've ever respected. He's the only cop I like. He's the only cop I'd want to pull me over. I don't want that to be the case. As nice as that compliment is for him, I want that to be prevalent to lots of people. I want people to learn from Owen. But what is crazy is I've had some news that now in police training, people are using our videos to educate new recruits. So that's mental to think that we could make a video on how to deal with a member of the public and they are likely to learn from us.
Charge for it, George.
Yeah, business, right? I'm so bad at this. Maybe we'll get you involved. I think there are so many wonderful police officers out there. But again, sometimes it's the actions of the minority that speak for the majority. It's the poor drivers in the car scene that make the car scene look bad. It's the badly behaved men towards women that make men look bad. So I think we're trying to avoid that and move more into education and try and make sure that everyone's on board with supporting the car community. But also it's down to the car community to take some responsibility and understand that it's down to both of us to work together. It's not down to the cops to fix it. It's not down to the car community to fix it. It's both of us need to work together.
I'm going to give you something that happened to me as a scenario.
Okay.
I think I'm going to have to check after the podcast if I can even say this on camera. On Christmas Eve last year, I was driving my AMG. I'm going to rephrase that. On Christmas Eve last year, someone I know was driving his AMG GTR very fast because he was very happy and excited and going to his friend's house down a slip road onto a motorway. He looked in his rear view mirror and he saw a little white light in the dash area of the BMW X5 that was behind him and immediately knew that the next junction he was coming off with that X5. Got pulled into a lay-by when the blues and twos came on the unmarked car. And he immediately sunk in the chair and thought, oh no, that's my license gone. I'm done. There's no way. And in that split moment, I had to make a decision whether it was going to be truthful or tell a lie. The police officer came out and asked, I'm going to give you one opportunity to tell me how fast you were going. And if it's anywhere near what I've got clocked on my dash, you might be lucky. So chose truth. And I said between 110 and 120 miles per hour down the road. With that, showed the clocked speed at 114 within their car. And because I told the truth, let off charge. And although the person was shaken up a lot by the experience, I couldn't believe that had actually been let go. And when I told people about that, they were shocked as well. Do you think that person should have been done that day?
It's hard, man, because I see this from both Owen's perspective and I see it from mine. There should always be a repercussion for going outside of the rules, but also there's so much more to it than that. I am a big believer in education over potentially ruining someone's situation. That copper wouldn't have known that person well enough to know whether he does it all the time and he's taking full advantage of whatever, or it could just be a one-off. You've made a mistake. Owen has talked to me about various scenarios he's been in. I won't go into detail, but he's talked to me about things that have happened where education has been key, where it's just, treat that person like a human being and talk to them, and they will ultimately give you the same respect back. And there's a phrase that he taught me about called Batari's box. I'll treat you how you treat me. And that's a very good example. He said, look, we know you're going fast. Tell me how fast you were going. I'll respect you if you respect me. And then as a result, that person offers respect back. And guess what? You got respect in return. And I think that's a fantastic way to police, because I don't believe that taking someone's license away will stop them speeding, because they'll just come back. They'll be wanting to do it even more, and then they'll do it again. The key is to show them why they shouldn't be doing it and know that there is a time and a place. As you know, race the track, not the road. If you want to do a big send, take it on a track. I know it's not that easy, especially if you've got performance cars. I get temptation all the time, and we are all tempted by a million different things in life. But I think that's a prime example of respect one. And I think it worked really well for that person.
Well,
Do you agree?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I actually did wonder that night.
Did you get rewarded, or did this person get rewarded
the experience of
for their honesty?
The experience of being let off of something like that made me realize how fortunate I was to have my license. So it did enough, and I actually haven't done anything like that since.
But you have to have your license taken away to sometimes realize what you're missing.
Potentially. And I think if that had happened, that would have also been a valuable lesson.
Vision Zero Southwest worked with us closely, and they actually funded the police car. So they fronted Owen the $30,000 to purchase the vehicle. And they also fronted a little budget to provide modifications. But I've been very lucky that a lot of companies have helped me out along the way and provided some of those mods. But at the end of the project, that car will be sold and given back to Vision Zero. And I'm going to answer it right now, because people are going to say, well, where did Vision Zero get their money? Vision Zero get their money. I will probably get this wrong in saying it, because I've been corrected by Owen before. But if you speed and then you, for example, get offered a speed awareness course, and then you go and do that speed awareness course, you've had to pay for it. Yeah. So any money that's left from that goes into Vision Zero, to my knowledge. So you have to speed and get fined for it, learn from your mistake, and then the rest of that money goes into a pot that gets used for road safety. Of course, years ago, road safety was covered very differently, but now, because we've got such an impact, we're able to do the unique stuff. And that's why Focus RS police car has come out of nowhere.
Now that you mentioned the Focus RS police car, and I think about the wrap, and I think about shows that many people listening may have gone to, the likes of Autosport International, Gravity, etc. And there is always one stand, which usually doesn't have a great amount of people stood at it, but there is a Lotus. I've seen a Lotus Evora wrap police car.
Yeah.
I've seen the Focus RS. Are they wrapped the same as what a police car and a unit in Swindon would currently be wrapped in right now? Do you have to get permission to wrap them that way? Are they actual police cars?
So the Lotus Evora was an engagement vehicle, and that was funded and donated to us by Lotus. I don't want to say to us, to the police by Lotus for, as far as I'm aware, a year. So they use it for a year as an engagement vehicle. And the way that they describe it is, if you walked past a Vauxhall Corsa, you'd be like, that was it. You look past a Lotus Evora and you look at it, you might walk up to it, you might take pictures with it, and then you might speak to the police officer that stood next to it. Makes a difference, right? So it catches your eye and also catches your attention. Because that worked so well, the Lotus Evora went back to Lotus. They took the wrap off and it went back. It was grey. It was a very, very cool car. And if you know much about the Lotus Evora, especially the GT410 Sport, it's a hell of a track weapon. We then obviously got hold of the Focus RS and did the projects that we've been doing. But in answer to your question regarding the livery, they're not functional police cars. However, Owen always says, if I drive past a crime, I can't just drive past it and ignore it. But the way that I look at it is that it's not set up to bung someone in the back of a police car.
So those cars do get driven on the roads.
They get driven on the road. But for example, if he was driving from
what's the
police HQ
to
a car show, and then he sees something going wrong, he can't not pull over, but he'd have to call for someone else, I can imagine.
What's the response to that?
Both incredibly positive in person and then incredibly negative online, because people say, I don't want my taxpayers' money buying this and buying that. But then people just don't see what social media does, because as you know as well as I do, trying to explain social media to your parents is nigh impossible. It's like, Mum, so I made a video today and 1,917,000 people watched it.
My mum, bless her, is awful at telling the difference between 100,000 and 700,000. She just can't grasp
Mm,
the difference in numbers because she's never really had to deal with that. And when I tell her things about my podcast and stats, I see it going one ear and out the other. But with
it's
time,
mad, isn't
people
it?
do learn. And I think it's the same for what you're doing with your content and the car community. In time, people will learn, but there will always be an amount of people that won't learn. Do you think people have to fail and get it wrong at some point, at least once, to actually learn something properly?
Yes, to a degree. But before I forget, I want to mention that in your podcast with Adam C., he said that sometimes the numbers just are numbers. And until you see those people in real life, it doesn't hit home as to quite how much of an impact you've made. Like his 600,000 to 700,000 subs is a cool number to look at on the screen. But until you go to a car meet and every third person is shouting, Adam C, Adam C, of course, it's like, whoa. Like I've come home so wiped out. My social battery is dead from car shows because I've not been able to move without people taking photos. And again, that's not a brag. There's loads of shows where I've not been recognized, and I'm by all means happy to admit that. But I went to Ford Fair, not this year, the year before, and the girlfriend at the time had to get in the car and say, I'm done. I just can't be here anymore. She was sat in the car because she couldn't hang out with me because all people wanted to do was talk to me. They didn't have any time for her. It was all just, hi, George. Hi, George. I watch your video. That's a nightmare. It's lovely to meet people, but it's a nightmare. And I can imagine for Adam C, it's so much worse. But yes, in answer to your question, you do have to make those mistakes to learn. And I do actually believe they're valuable. Like I would not have learned to change a tire had a tire not blown out on the road. I would not have learned to change my oil had I not had low oil one day, for example. It's only because my coolant tank exploded so many times and my silicon pipes leaked that I know now the smell of coolant. So although the girlfriend might be like, oh, why do you know what coolant smells like? I'm like, well, because I've driven in my car so many times and I've been like, and then pulled over and I've got no coolant left because it's all fallen out. Like you have to make these mistakes to learn, and car guys have just made more mistakes than the average person, you know? Instead of getting it fixed by the main dealer, you've probably done it yourself. Maybe not you, I mean, but you know, normal car guys.
Definitely not me.
But then the likes of Lee Lockwood, look, he's upside down on his driveway with a gearbox on his stomach. Like
Or Matt at the very beginning of his channel.
prime example, Matt. But again, he had to break something to learn from it, and he had to take something off to realize that it was actually made by Ford, or was actually made by Audi. He wouldn't have known that had he not tried it the first time, right? So I think it's a message for everyone that sometimes it's just important just to give it a go and not be scared of failure. And I think it does. It does. I think it applies to everyone in every aspect of life, really.
Thank you very much for coming on.
I respect you.
Legend.
Thank you.
Lots
Cheers.
of
Thank
respect.
you so much.
And if you like the video, please like and subscribe.